everybody. Welcome to When We Walk. This is a little podcast where we discuss the things that come up as we walk through life. I'm Micah.
I'm Shireen. And we're live.
We're live. Thanks for joining us on this live version. No editing. We're just here with you. So thanks for being with us.
So sorry ahead of time for anything that we say that might not get edited out.
Yeah. True.
So we just finished the biggest day in the church calendar.
Church world.
Right?
Yep.
We would say that.
Yeah, totally.
More than Christmas.
Yeah, like there's a great little line I read in prepping for this week that if you take Christmas out of the gospel story, you lose a couple chapters in each gospel.
Right.
If you take Easter out of the gospel story, you don't have Christianity.
Yes.
So yes, it is the biggest.
So true.
Yep.
So biggest day, kind of like the lead up to this, and then now we're on the other side of it. How do we feel? How do you feel after you preach? Like this is like your Super Bowl.
Yeah.
Right?
A little bit. Yeah. Yeah. I never thought of it that way. That's for a kid who never even got close to a Super Bowl, it's a little pressure. Yeah, I feel good. You know, for me, after just pure vulnerability, after a big weekend like this, I kind of don't want to think about what I just said in front of so many people.
Yeah.
Because I'll go back into every word I didn't say right, or every story that didn't come out the way I wanted to, or even theologically wrestling with like, did that come out the way?
Or like, did you use the right word?
Yeah.
Yes.
So I kind of do just like major shutdown, and it was great. You cooked a great little lunch and
partially
ham and macaroni.
I made macaroni and cheese.
It was so good.
Basically all
Homemade
I
macaroni and
cooked.
cheese. This is the best.
Honey baked ham from the
best.
store and macaroni and cheese.
It was great.
Was fun. Yeah.
And funny thing, so I made the joke on Easter morning as we're reading through John 20 about John telling the whole world for all time that he's faster than Peter.
Yes,
he made it to the
which
10
is
first.
so funny.
And honestly, that wasn't a pre-prepared joke. That came to me as I was like reading in first service, just reading the scripture to everybody during first service, and thought, oh, that's kind of interesting.
That's a good one.
And then there's memes about that all over. People have been sending me all these memes.
I know.
Yeah.
So there's some funny jokes out there.
There are.
So you
John
caught
and
it.
Peter racing. Yeah.
That's a really good one. Yeah.
How are you feeling?
I feel good. I think we're coming into our kids' spring break, so it just feels like there's a slight rest, but then we're about to leave on a big trip as well.
Serbia coming up in a couple days.
Kind of not a ton of rest, but I feel good because church was so great.
It was.
It's one of my favorite
really
services.
weekend.
It's something I look forward to every year. We have a team that just puts every ounce of their creative and thoughtful energy into the weekend and physical energy. And I hope, the hope is that all the people, like our people, get this every weekend, right? They get to enjoy the fruit of everything that our team puts together, staff and volunteers. But like the hope is that all the people who show up really get like, they really did get our freshest and our best and like a great experience, and hopefully enough to want to say, I think I want to check them out again. That's always the hope for everyone for Easter, that you hope that people got a great hospitable experience. They connected and met Jesus in a hopefully new way, and then want to come back for more. Yeah,
I hope so. And I think it's important for all of us to carry the mentality. You know, there's kind of, people talk about CEO Christians.
Right.
Christmas, Easter only Christians. And sometimes people talk about that kind of in a negative sense. And at Lifegate, we don't hold that as a negative view whatsoever. Like it's such a gift that
it's an opportunity.
So many many people come to church and are curious about God or want to have this connection. And I think it's important for us, you know, to think about the people who were there, pray for the people who were there, that God grab a hold of their hearts, that they would be continuing to be drawn to Jesus. And that, I mean, any opportunity people come to be a part of worship and hear the gospel, you hope bears fruit down the road. And so trying not to pick up like a jaded mentality of like, well, everyone shows up for Easter and then goes about their lives. But no, there's spiritual stuff happening in the atmosphere in people's hearts.
Yes.
All over the globe on Easter weekend, which I think is just unbelievable. It's amazing.
I think it's profound.
Yeah.
The fact that happens globally, that we have this
crazy.
Spiritual, something's happening in the spiritual on that day all over the globe. And so God's doing something.
Yep.
So if you had a friend or neighbor or someone that came that maybe you just don't see very often, like, just ask them, how did that hit you?
Mm-hmm.
What are you thinking on the other side of
Yeah.
coming to church on Sunday? And do you want to come back and join us and invite them back?
Yep.
Because it really is, we're learning it's about personal invitation.
It really is.
So,
Cool thought just came to me.
okay.
4 years ago,
Yeah.
COVID year,
Oh, yeah.
2020, churches were shut down.
Yes.
On
That
Easter.
was
At least
terrible.
a lot of churches globally
Yeah.
were shut down on Easter. And it's just amazing to me that that has had, in one sense, no real long-term effect on the church. Like, here we are 4
true.
years later, and people are
Busting at
back,
the
and
seams,
churches are busting
wanting-
at the seams, and people,
Yeah.
like, God just won't be stopped.
I know.
He
Well,
just
I
won't.
think people are craving, they're realizing
Yeah.
we can't live apart from each other,
Mm-hmm.
and I need something more than what this world has to offer.
Yeah.
So-
and I should say that had no real impact, I would say, on necessarily church engagement or spiritual hunger. It obviously had impact on human beings.
Yeah, for sure.
But kind of cool.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Okay. Well, we promised questions and
Yeah.
answers.
Yeah.
So maybe we should answer a few questions.
Okay. Can I start with this one?
Okay.
You know what I'm going to say. Any good books either of you would suggest for us?
Oh, good books. Well, you're more the reader.
Yeah. Well, it's just
me.
this book that I've been listening.
Oh my gosh. Oh, you guys. Kyle, you shouldn't have asked this question.
Yes.
Micah could talk the whole podcast about
yeah,
this
I'll
book
make it
he's reading.
quick, but I just finished an audiobook called How to Stay Married by Harrison Scott Key. I mean, just one of the best audiobook I've ever listened to. I mean, it was just, he's funny, he's deep, he's poetic,
He's Southern.
he's Southern,
Which we appreciate.
and his story, just this love story between he and his wife, just, it's tragic, it's awful, it's raw, it's real, but it's sprinkled in with, not even sprinkled, it's filled with so much, the way he writes it, with so much comedy. It is the best audio book out there right now, in my opinion.
Wow, that is really strong.
It's so good. I could not stop listening to it.
You could not stop talking
I wanted
about
to
it.
just like walk around with my headphones on all day long.
I know.
Yeah, it's great. So that was easy for me.
Oh, okay. So
What about
you're
you?
you're only giving a fun read. Well, this isn't. No,
This is
because it's
I
not
mean, you
quite
just said,
fun.
what's a book?
Okay.
That's a book.
Okay.
How about you?
Gosh.
Good
Is that what he said? Good books.
Yeah.
Only good ones. Well, I read, I don't know if I said it on, I don't know if I said it on any of our other episodes. I read for the first time Hind's Feet in High Places.
Yeah.
Did I mention that before already?
I don't know if you've mentioned it here.
It's a book. It's an allegory that was written, I think, in the 50s, maybe. It's kind of like a updated version of Pilgrim's Progress
Yeah.
by this woman who wrote this beautiful allegory. I've heard people talk about it for years. And then my group of college girlfriends, we all decided to read it together. And it was, I feel like it's profound. I feel like every Christian should read it. It's very poetic, and I mean, it's an allegory. So you kind of have to go in knowing this is a picture story in a sense, like it's a very descriptive writing. And it had me in tears. I could like relate to it because it hits you in your feels, kind of like the Psalms hit you in your feels. So I think that one is probably one of the better ones I've read recently.
Okay, I need to read
Yeah.
it. Still haven't.
I know you do. I even
started
bought a
it.
pretty like.
No, we got like 2 chapters into it with the kids. And
Yeah, I
then
bought like a really pretty
we
like
fizzled.
coffee table version to read
Yeah.
with the kids, and we started. It would be a good one to read out
Yeah.
loud with kids. So
yeah, we did it during
do
the
that.
Christmas season, and things got a little hectic.
yeah, we'll have to revisit. But
Yep.
that's what I'll say. I do have other fun ones, but I don't know if they're great books to suggest.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay. All right.
All right.
What else do we have?
We have.
Where do you want to go?
So how about this one?
all over the board.
Just because I think it's kind of an easy one too. What have been some practical ways that you guys as a family have been living invitational lives? I think that's an easy one to talk about because we just did something. You want to talk about your Nowruz party?
Well, okay. First of all, I would like to say we would love to live more invitational lives.
Right.
We're, as most people are in this phase with kids in school and in sports, we're really busy. And so we hit after school time, and it's like who's taking
running
who
in and
where.
out of the
It's
house.
just like
Yep.
taxiing people around town.
Yep.
So in most ways, we try to live invitationally, just being aware in those times. But my heart is to have people over in my house all the time. I love hosting people.
Yeah, you do.
So my background's Persian. My dad's from Iran. And so I grew up celebrating the Persian New Year, which is always the first day of spring, the spring equinox, like literally at that hour. And over the past couple of years, we've started having some friends over, our life group, or we've invited other friends to kind of share some of the culture.
Yeah.
It's a good reason to eat good Persian food. And so this year we invited our neighbor, who his roommate is Iranian.
That was
And
super cool.
so he invited some other Iranian friends,
things,
and we just kind of combined these.
What are the chances that
I
we'd have an
know.
Iranian neighbor?
Right? And
Yeah.
then combined our efforts, and it was such a fun
It was so
night.
great. We had so much fun.
We had so much fun just talking about different cultures and life and eating really good food together.
Dancing in the living room.
Listen, it's not a good Persian party unless there's dancing. So that's what you need.
So true.
Good food, dancing. It was a lot of fun. And so we got to host some neighbors. We had some other neighbors come over who are also multicultural. He's from the Philippines. And so it was just really
It was
fun.
a great time. Yeah.
And it was just casual.
Yeah.
There was nothing. The intention was just to get together and have a good time.
And it was perfect. Yeah. Some neighbors who didn't know each other got to know each other.
Yeah.
And just fun connection. Are all Persians just like
Outgoing. Outgoing.
yes, so every
Yeah.
Persian that I've interacted with, and these
And you've
just
met a lot.
fit the bill. Yeah, they're just socially engaging people. Like, they're not awkward, they're not real self-conscious. They'll jump up and dance in front of everybody. They're funny. They're like,
I mean, that's the family I grew up in,
Yeah.
so I don't know a whole lot
Okay.
different. And so anytime there was a family gathering and neighbors and friends and other Persian people came over, that's what
They're
it is.
just
It's
fun people.
full of life.
fun people.
I think it's just,
Yeah.
you know what? There's a lot of other cultures around the world that have a lot more, I don't know how to say it, like life. I don't know. We're kind of closed off here in the U.S. You know, like
Yeah.
we like our own space, and a lot
We're
of these
very
other
socially self-conscious
yes,
too.
and a lot of these other cultures are like, no, I'm going to bring my friend, and then my cousin's going to
Yep.
come with me, and we're going to go to that party, and we're all going to show up together, and we're just going to have a good time and get to
Yep.
know one another. And yeah,
Yeah.
so that was fun. That's one of the ways we are trying to live
Yep.
invitational
Yep,
lives.
that's good. All right. How about, let's see here. There's some good ones. There's some like deep ones, and there's some easier ones. How about, why don't we just kind of dive deep real quick?
Okay.
Okay.
There are some really deep ones.
So how do you deal with, place boundaries, and change habits to avoid or stop sexual sin in a relationship?
Ooh, whoa.
It's a big one.
That is a
Yeah,
shift.
It's
Okay.
huge. Yeah, it's a big question. We won't be able to like fully unpack all things.
That's a lot.
But I would say, starting out, defining like what's the, as far, like, just to be clear, sexual sin, I would say, is any sexual activity outside of marriage.
Right.
So the first step would be, is that relationship a marital relationship, or is it a dating relationship, or is it?
You kind of have to define the relationship
yeah.
and what it is. Yeah.
So we're going to start there and say, okay, this is everything I'll say here and that we'll share here is in the context of marriage. So how do you deal with, place boundaries, and change habits to avoid or stop sexual sin in a marriage is what I would say. And I think there's a few layers that are pretty like easy just to get into. This is the kind of thing that you really want to talk to friends about, or talk to a pastor, or talk to a counselor about, people that you really, really trust, who can know your situation and be able to speak into what's going on with y'all. But I think being able to talk openly as a couple about what's going on, about the sin that might be getting.
You're saying in a marriage.
In the context of marriage.
Okay. If
is there
someone is
sexual
struggling,
immorality
sexual
happening?
immorality,
I'm
okay.
assuming. And so,
So let's define some of that, because this is probably what people are wondering. Like an affair,
Pornography.
Pornography, any sort of, I'm finding some sort of sexual
fulfillment
or emotional fulfillment outside of
my spouse.
Yeah.
Yeah. So first it has to be acknowledged. And sometimes the first step, the easier first step is not necessarily confess to your spouse. It's to confess to a trusted person who can then walk you and your spouse through whatever it is you're going through, especially if it's something super, super explosive.
Yeah.
So confession, though, is where it has to start. Yeah.
Which takes humility.
Yeah.
Which is hard if it's not chosen by the.
Yeah.
If you've found something out and then that other party maybe isn't ready to confess, that is hard.
And then I would say you don't need to have any any opposite sex relationships in your life. I guess I'm thinking boundaries here, where you're attracted to the person with your heard someone even today talking about this, your office boyfriend or your office girlfriend, which I thought was such a funny term.
Oh, wow.
But
I've heard that before.
I heard a pastor mention it today, and just kind of your best bud in the office who you're attracted to.
Of the opposite gender.
Yeah, that you're drawn to. So none of that. And then screens. I mean, we can talk all day long about screens. I mean, they're just, we are being fed opportunities to step into sexual sin all the time. And so having lots of smart, wise limits around your screens, and within a relationship, knowing each other's passcodes, your phones are not off limits from one another. Being able to look at search history if necessary, setting smart limits about when you're on your screen, and depending on how big of a struggle it is with you, those limits might need to be tighter.
Yeah, I think that's good.
So confession, external relationships, and screen limitations, I think, are just some. And
then having people that I think you help hold you accountable if you know that is something that you have kind of proclivity to that.
Yep.
But I also think that's funny that's how you read that question, because I was thinking of like, how do you place boundaries on a relationship maybe that you aren't married? Because that is also a place where you can fall into temptation.
Okay, yeah.
And I would think there are a lot of the same.
Okay, yeah.
See what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So like, if you know, like maybe you already are in a relationship where you're having sex and you're like, I don't want to be doing this.
Yep.
One, what are the situations you are putting yourselves in? Don't put yourselves in those situations.
Yeah.
So if it means we hang out at one person's house that lives alone versus the other person has roommates, go hang out where you know the roommates might walk in the door.
Yep.
That will just help create a little safe boundary,
healthy fear.
a little fear. And then, I mean, I think way back in the day, we heard people who said, no horizontal, like we stay vertical, we never go horizontal. That smart. Is just smart. And then again, accountability. I think the biggest thing is accountability. Like, do you have another couple? If you are both wanting to do this relationship well, and you are both seeking to, like, we want to be as pure as we can in walking this relationship, then having maybe another couple who's just maybe a couple years ahead of you, mentor couple, and tell them, ask us the hard questions. And be ready that they're going to ask you the hard questions.
And I think, too, that's all really good. Understanding why boundaries matter.
Yeah.
And when you're in the dating phase, or even the engagement phase, but definitely the dating phase, if you let your relationship be defined by just sexual activity, you're actually not really getting to know each other. You're not really falling in love with each other.
You're not building an actual relationship.
A friendship.
Right.
You know, like you're going to have to, on the other side of marriage, be able to spend time together just being together.
Majority of your time is going to be communication, not having sex.
Yeah. So
there's other things.
The dating and the engagement phase is a great time to cultivate an actual friendship, and let the sex come later. And when it comes, if you get married, there will be no guilt attached to that. There will be not the baggage that you can bring into it if you're wrestling through this in your dating and engagement years. So
that's good. Yep. So someone else asked, going back to boundaries.
Yeah.
Boundaries in your marriage so that your parents don't step inside that circle. Okay. Yes.
Let's see.
One of the things we actually talk about a lot with premaritals,
In-laws.
we talk about in-laws. That is like a whole subject.
Oh, yeah.
Because for so many people, it becomes an issue, like a very divisive issue, divisive in between the two of you, divisive with kids when you have kids, divisive with the families. So it is very tender.
Yeah.
So I think boundaries, the first thing I think you have to set is you two are a team. We're a team. Like no matter what, we will always team. This is team number one, that we have to be locked arms no matter what. We will choose each other over our previous nuclear family. Like this is now our team. And you kind of have to both be willing to lean in there first. So that's, I think, the first thing.
Yeah. And then so any boundaries that are set with parents need to be agreed upon by both people and talked about by both people with the effort of protecting this new family unit of you and your spouse. So I think, boundaries have to be communicated and agreed upon.
Yeah.
And I think that sometimes what happens in relationships is one person is okay with a particular parent being more involved than the other. Maybe they never really talk about it. Maybe it just kind of happens over time. So just being able to talk about it, I think, is important.
Yeah.
And then if necessary, talk to your parents about it, which can be the harder thing.
It is hard.
Which is like, hey, we're actually going to do whatever. Like we did Tuesday nights every night with our parents, and you're starting to feel like that's actually like one of our only free nights of the week. And so I think we need to set a boundary there, having that conversation and helping them see like, hey, this is a really important night for us. It's going to be our new date night. So we're going to have to either change the schedule or not hang out on Tuesday nights anymore, rather than just ghosting them and coming up with an excuse every Tuesday night for why you can't be there. So boundaries require courage.
Yeah,
Don't set boundaries if you don't also want to follow that up with some courage. Because if you don't communicate the boundary, that's not loving.
Yep.
And boundaries are meant to be an act that is loving to everybody involved. It's not, it might be protective of you in certain settings, but it's also going to help this person who's maybe overstepping. And so boundaries really are loving. I think we've kind of don't always remember that.
We forget that. I agree.
And so if you're going to if you're going to choose one, you need to have the courage to communicate it.
I think also it helps to remember that you're setting these boundaries, but they're not hard and fast all the time, because there are going to be times where you're going to say, no, we're going to do this instead. And so I think remembering that you're setting these for kind of the long haul of protecting where you see there could be some pitfalls coming, but you're also kind of setting a new pace so that here and there you can make different decisions. And then I think one of the other things is, as you set healthy boundaries, to remember, like, okay, for instance, if it's your family that I'm struggling with, we're going to set this boundary. It really shouldn't be me talking to your family and setting the boundary. Like, it has to be
me.
And I think that
you have to advocate for one another and do it as a team. Don't say, hey, I really want to hang out with you, but Shireen's not into it. She doesn't really like you. So, but I do.
You can't do that.
Yeah, you can't do that.
You've got to be the advocate in your family for your spouse.
Say, hey, we've decided that this is what's best for everybody involved.
And I think
then once kids get involved, you see a whole other side of your parents. And there has to be a whole new set of boundaries. But again, communication, both with your spouse and with the parents that you're setting the boundary with, might be hard at times, and sometimes it's not received really well initially, but eventually, in most cases, we all want to be in relationship with each other, and if we have to change the terms of those relationships, it might be hard at first, but eventually people settle in to a new normal, and you'll be glad you did.
I think in general, when you give boundaries to anyone, friendship, in-law relationship, whatever, I think anytime you give the boundary, it has to come first with love and then context. You've got to share why you're doing it, and that it doesn't mean never, or it doesn't mean that this is closed off. There's another way. So like, we're not going to do this, but we are going to do this.
Yep.
And so kind of helping see the both, like no here, but a yes here. I think that helps for people, because when they feel like there's a boundary set against them, you can get defensive. But if they know, okay, you can't do those nights anymore. Okay, that's disappointing. We're going to have to shift. Oh, but you can do that. Okay.
Yeah. Yep.
Okay, it'll be a little different, but that's okay. And I think it helps. It's just, you always say it, clarity is kindness. And you're giving clarity to why you need this boundary in your life. And that's a kind way of letting them know, like, I still love you. I still want, remember, boundaries aren't, you're not canceling the relationship. You're just defining it.
Yeah, it's a good way to say it.
I think that
I like that.
People tend to think boundaries mean I am like protecting myself and I don't like that person. But actually, boundaries, what you said, it's a loving thing you do with people you love and you want relationship with, but you just need it in a specific way. So
yep, that's great. Well said.
Communication.
I like that. It's a good line. All right, here's a good one.
Okay.
Hello, I've been to your church a handful of times and enjoy it very much. I believe in God, but honestly not sure I believe in Jesus, but feeling called for something. Any advice is appreciated. That is an awesome question.
Okay. I mean, that is actually, I love how honest that is. And
Yeah.
I think there's a lot more people who feel that than would even
So
admit.
good. Yep.
Like, I come to church. In fact, we had a friend, our friend Brock.
Yeah.
We'll call him out. He was that for years.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I believe in God, but like
The Jesus thing was hard.
the Jesus thing, I'm not so sure.
Yeah. So finding out why you don't believe in Jesus is important. I remember having a conversation with Brock in my office and saying, what is it about Jesus you struggle with?
Yeah.
And this was a great line. He was like, the beginning and the end. And I was like, well, what do you mean? Born of a virgin, rose from the dead. He's like, I just really struggle with this.
Yeah.
So it was
Two wild miracles.
Yeah, the
Absolutely.
supernatural aspect of, and yet those are the things, the resurrection especially, and we talked about that this weekend, that sets Jesus apart from every other God.
Yeah.
And Jesus is God because he rose from the dead. That's what we believe. And that he came to die for our sins and to make a way for us to be in relationship with him. It's just not, it's so different from every other religion, which was, in every other religion was a revelation, some kind of a divine download that some spiritual leader got and then wrote or taught about the way to God, where Jesus actually did something. He came and he died and he rose again. So I think what I would encourage you to do is really try to nail down what is it about Jesus in particular that you struggle with, and then begin to do some digging on that particular issue. And I mentioned this weekend at Easter. Like, you get into the resurrection, the book, The Body of Proof, Dr. Jeremiah Johnson, you get into the resurrection and you look at the loads of evidence that point to, it's really hard to come up with an alternative explanation for what happened that weekend, other than this man rose from the dead. And so once you see that evidence, if you're an evidence person, then I think it can help move you in a particular direction. The other thing might not be evidence for you. It might be just like, why is Jesus the only way? Or why couldn't God have created lots of ways to him? I love how my friend Chris Williams says it. There is only one way to God, who is Jesus, but there are many ways to Jesus. And so it's not quite as exclusive as of a path as we often think it is, but Jesus is the way, the truth, and the life. And so another piece of advice, talk to Christians that you know. So when you come to, church here, join us again and stop by, talk to a leader and ask them, hey, I've got questions. Who can I talk to? And they will connect you with someone who you can talk to and you can answer and have dialogue with. And it sounds like God is working in your heart. Sounds like he's stirring some things in your heart. And I'd encourage you to listen to that.
I think it's also interesting because a lot of people, I think it's fascinating that a lot of people are okay or even accepting of God, right? That feels safe. Someone is in control of the world, and I feel like, there is some spiritual dynamic to the world. I think for a lot of people, the struggle with Jesus is then it becomes very personal and very like, oh, this is the only way, and we don't like only.
We
We don't like what feels like a narrow path, which,
Yeah.
you know, that's hard. But I think when you finally discover that Jesus is God, and the same maybe some thoughts you had about God, but then you learn the whole of how this works together, there is way more freedom than you think there is in it. I also think about, do people even read that book anymore? We read it in college because of my friend Matt, who was struggling.
Which one?
The Case for Christ.
Yeah.
Is it
that's
still
a
a
great
thing?
one. Yeah.
Lee Strobel.
Yeah, that's a good one. I haven't read it
There's probably
in a
an
long
updated version.
time. Actually, I heard him on a podcast recently. He came out with a movie version of that at some point.
Okay. Well, he was like
come out with
a
a new
journalist
book
or
recently.
something.
Yeah.
And he was actually
Yeah, Lee
on
Strobel.
he went down a path like, I'm going to disprove Jesus existed. And he could not.
Yeah.
And he came to faith. So it was kind of like and then he wrote a book saying, yes, this is real.
Yeah.
So I know it might be older, but I remember reading it in college, and it was super helpful for some of our friends who really struggled with Jesus.
true.
But
Yeah, it's a
willing
great,
to believe in God.
it's a classic.
yeah,
Still holds up.
we're
Some
dating
of our book
ourselves.
recommendations
Yes.
are old. All right, you pick the next question.
Oh, me? Okay. All right, let's do this one maybe.
Okay.
How do you guys balance work, ministry, parenting, family, and what have been challenges? I don't know.
Yeah, the word balance is not a part of our lives.
It
I'll
is
say
not
that.
a part of our lives.
Nothing's balancing, but
I think this is, but this is something everyone, I don't think it's just us.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people struggle with it. I think the hardest part, I would start with this because I don't know that we are always doing it well. I think the thing that I always come back to is like, when I start feeling like the chaos is swirling, I come back to, wait, what are the most important things? I need to connect with Jesus personally.
Yep.
I need to connect with my family and the people that are the closest to me and make sure they feel seen, loved, known, valued. And then I believe in our job. And it's hard for us. I don't know. Maybe I'm just speaking for me. But it is hard to me to separate the ministry role or job part of our lives from everything else. Because the way I see it is like, I get to do a job that I love Jesus, and I get to just like do that as part of my job.
Yeah.
So I don't feel like there is a whole lot of separation. Do you?
No, I think there is with things like
our
set boundaries around email and work
those things,
hours,
the things that you can.
Office hours, I should say. You got to set a smart schedule, and our calendar is got a lot. Everything is back to back to back to back.
Yeah.
But it is planned and it is laid out. But as far as where your heart goes in the midst of all of it,
that's hard to control.
Yeah, and we're also like, I think it's important to remember that we are not compartmentalized beings. We might try to be, but whatever's happening at home, I bring with me to work, and things that are happening at work, I'm going to take with me back home, and that's going to affect my parenting. It's going to affect our marriage.
Yep. Conversations.
And so when you understand that, you try to work with that instead of against that. And how do I, how can I approach everything God has given me to do in a way that is pleasing to Him and loving to others? And then what have you not given me to do? And have to sometimes be brutally honest about like, I'm
That's
doing
not
this,
mine.
but God's not asking me to do that. Like,
or there's someone else either at work or in our lives that we can say, that's for them. Like, that's not mine to take on.
Yep.
I think that's helpful.
Yeah.
Do we have it in balance?
Nah,
Not always.
not really. There's rhythms. I like that word a little bit better.
That's a better
There's
way to
rhythms.
say it.
There's times where, like Monday through Thursday are just intense.
Yeah.
Work and then evenings are just slammed. I tell people all the time, I feel like we're busier from 5 to 9 than we are from 9 to 5.
That's true.
And so life is full for those 4 days. And then Friday is slower. Saturday's our Sabbath. And a lot of times it's kids' activities mixed in there. and Sunday we're kind of getting back at it with church. So we have a rhythm as a family that's not so much a balance, but it's a rhythm.
But I think also our kids are very engaged in what's happening in all of our, like we're engaged in their lives, they're engaged in each other's lives, and they're engaged in what's happening in church because we're both in it.
Yep.
And so it kind of flows in that way together a little bit. I mean, there are times I think where it just time-wise divides, but at least heart and focus, we all kind of do it together in some ways.
Yep.
I don't know.
Yep.
Maybe that didn't answer the question.
No, it's good.
Maybe that confused people more.
It's about as good as we got.
Oh.
All right. Why don't we do maybe a couple more?
Okay.
Let's see here. I'm trying to think.
I don't know.
Let me just follow up. What is Sabbath and why is it important in today's world? That's a great follow-up question to what we just talked about. Sabbath obviously is something we value. We talk about it a lot. You see it at the very beginning of Scripture, that on the seventh day God rested, and then he instructed the Israelites every 7 days on the seventh day to rest. And in some instances, he instructs them to rest as a reminder that they're no longer slaves. In other instances, he instructs them to rest as a reminder that he is God who created everything. Basically, like, I got it under control. You're not God. I am. Like, you can be at peace. Reminder. I run the world. You don't run the world. So it's really, I believe Sabbath is a rhythm that is woven into the fabric of our relationship with God. I don't see it as a law that is now done away with because Jesus is our Sabbath. He is our ultimate Sabbath and our ultimate rest and our ultimate source of peace. And Hebrews makes that really clear. But I think, theologically, you could say it this way: Jesus is Sabbath. He is rest. He is peace. He is wholeness. But when it comes to the rhythm of our relationship with God, I think a weekly Sabbath was woven into that from the very beginning, because we see it even before the law existed. Yeah. So I don't see it as a command that we have to follow in order to please God. I see it as a principle, a pattern, or you often say a gift given to us by God to say, if you want to live at your best and in relationship, deep connection to me, carve out a day a week.
And I love, Sabbath, or the word Shabbat, is to stop. So you're stopping. And I think you told me this, or you read it somewhere, that the only part of that command is to not work. Yeah. So what you have to personally define, what is my regular work? What am I going to stop? And then the thing I love most about it is a gift, and it is the same way that we come to church and take communion as a reminder of what Jesus did on the cross. Every week we get to rest, and that's the invitation of God's reminder that Jesus is our rest, and this partnership and this reminder that he is in control. I don't have to produce. I'm not, he doesn't accept me for what I produce. He accepts me for just relationship. Like, there's so much we can learn from practicing Sabbath that I think even goes beyond what we even know. I think there's so much. I think there's a body, mind, soul connect to that we could totally get into. I've read some stuff about not long ago about the fact that there is so much that a lot of us don't tap into, the fact that God is a God of our body, and he knows we need this rest. And if we don't, we're not going to make it. Yeah. So there's just so interesting. Just things like that. Just some. Do you know?
So
like
a friend was telling me, who works in the creative and tech space. He said, tech bros. I love. He said all the tech bros are into this thing right now called dopamine fasting, or it's almost like, or a dopamine like Sabbath. So the idea is how to not experience any dopamine for like a 24-hour period, which actually has some interesting connections to the idea of a Sabbath. The reason they say that is because we are such a dopamine heavy driven culture right now.
Right here.
Exactly. That's why I said the tech bros, they recognize like this is not healthy to just constantly be getting these hits of dopamine, gratification, excitement, interest, just bow on your brain. And it can really impact kind of your
wiring,
your
literal
thinking patterns,
brain,
all that.
what you think you need to feel.
Yeah. So
good.
Interestingly enough, these guys are saying, hey, one day a week or whatever, we do a dopamine fast, which is kind of like what a Sabbath was intended to be. It was like, just get away from all the stuff that stimulates you and just like be at peace.
It's
and
like
that doesn't mean
rest.
Don't do anything enjoyable or don't do anything fun.
Well, no, because we say Sabbath is delight. Like part of the things God wanted his people to do on Sabbath was just literally enjoy his creation.
Yep.
And I think that's what he wants us to do.
Mm-hmm.
So
it's good. It's a great question.
We love Sabbath.
We can overtalk that one.
We can.
We love it.
I love it so much.
And the reason why it's so important in our world today, I'll just say, because of screens and busyness, and our culture lives the opposite of Sabbath. So.
Okay, I have one that I think we should go to.
Okay.
What is one of the hardest parts of being the pastor of a large church like Lifegate?
Okay.
And she asked, how can we pray for you?
Oh, very kind of you to pray. Thank you for that. I will say I mean, I could get pretty vulnerable here and say, I am not by nature the person who is always looking to be at the front of the pack or on a stage. Mm-hmm. I never really have been that. There's like maybe leadership in me. Like I see things and I'm like, I think that could be done different and better and that kind of, but I've never been the like looking for the platform, the place, the whatever. And so sometimes that messes with my soul a little bit. Like even after Easter, like preaching the most important message ever to be told to tons of people. And just feeling very vulnerable after that and having moments of kind of, you pull away from it and you kind of think and you hash through it. And was that right? And was that faithful? And was the Lord pleased with that? And was that honoring to him? Was it honoring to anyone whose story like any examples I used? And did I say it right? And hopefully they, I presented their stories well. So I think it's the, I guess I would just say it's the exposure. Maybe that's the hardest thing for me is just the exposure that comes with being a part of a big church.
I would probably agree on the other side of like, I didn't realize anything about big church. I didn't go to bigger churches growing up, but I think the part of what you tend to see for pastors or their families from large churches, and you see how it tears families apart, or it eats them alive because they work so much, or like there can be so much pressure, at least from what it looks like on the outside for a lot of pastors that we can see from very large churches. I think that was what, I don't know that it scared me. I mean, it concerns
you on the front end, but I would say we have a very healthy culture.
We do
as a church,
which is great.
That's not going to be our story.
Well, and we've got such a great team.
Yeah,
I think that is
huge.
the beauty of a large church.
We all carry the load together.
We carry the load together, and so there are
staff and volunteers.
Yeah, when we went off for our 20-year anniversary, like you really could rest because you knew other people.
Yeah.
Everyone's doing this together. It's not just on you or us or whatever. Like it's a whole team of people carrying this vision. You just happen to be the one kind of guiding the process.
Yeah. I mean, it really is kind of dream scenario to step in as lead pastor of Lifegate, because it's a 40, we are 40, almost 50 years old, 49-year-old church almost.
Yeah.
And there's maturity there.
Yeah.
There's like people carry the load together. And we value rest, and we value accountability, and we value grace when people blow it. And like, it's such a healthy environment that it doesn't feel the weight or the pressure or the expectations to me are not the things that are all that hard.
No.
It's the exposure for me.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's good.
That's a great question.
Might be a good one to
wrap it up on.
Yeah. We've been going for a while.
Yeah. Thanks for
I know we didn't
sticking
get to
with
everybody's
us. I know.
Questions. Sorry.
But you know what? I had this thought, because there's some really good ones here.
There are.
So one of our goals as we continue through season 2 is to focus on as we said at the beginning, the questions that come up as we walk through life. And y'all have given us some questions that we can throw in our back pocket and use for episodes down the road. So stick with us, and we may get to some of the questions you asked. Some of them are just a little too heavy to really be able to get into. Some of them, I think, require a little bit more thought, but we will use these in the future as we go.
Yeah. So we're excited for this season to come and hopefully hit some of the questions that might be stirring in your heart, or maybe some people they're asking these questions, and you can share the episodes with them as well. So
thanks for joining us. Have a great night.